From Gulliver's Travels regarding the race of immortals. One day, in much good company, I was asked by a person of quality whether I had seen any of their Struldbruggs or immortals. I said I had not desired he would explain to me what he meant by such an appellation applied to a mortal creature. He told me that sometimes, though very rarely, a child happened to be born in a family with a red circular spot in the forehead, directly over the left eyebrow, which was an infallible mark that it should never die. He said these births were so rare that he did not believe there could be above 1,100 Struldbruggs of both sexes in the whole kingdom, of which he computed about 50 in the metropolis, and among the rest a young girl born about 3 years ago. I cried out in rapture, "Happy nation, where every child hath at least a chance of being immortal! Happy people who enjoy so many living examples of ancient virtue, and have masters ready to instruct them in the wisdom of all former ages! But happiest beyond all comparison are those excellent Struldbruggs, who, being born exempt from that universal calamity of human nature, have their minds free and disengaged without the weight and depression of the spirits caused by the continual apprehension of death." He observed long life to be the universal desire and wish of mankind, that whoever had one foot in the grave was sure to hold back the other as strongly as he could, that the oldest had still hopes of living one day longer and looked on death as the greatest evil from which nature always prompted him to retreat. Only in this island of Lugnag the appetite for living was not so eager from the continual example of the Struldbruggs before their eyes. That the system of living contrived by me was unreasonable and unjust because it supposed a perpetuity of youth, health, and vigor, which no man could be so foolish to hope, however extravagant he may be in his wishes. That the question therefore was not whether a man would choose to be always in the prime of youth, attended with prosperity and health, but how he would pass a perpetual life under all the usual disadvantage which old age brings along with it. After this preface, he gave me a particular account of the Struldbruggs among them. He said that they commonly acted like mortals till about 30 years old, after which by degrees they grew melancholy and dejected, increasing in both till they came to fourscore. This he learned from their own confession, for otherwise there were, being above two or three of that species born in the age, they were too few to form a general observation by. When they came to fourscore years, which he reckoned is the extremity of living in this country, they had not all, excuse me, they had not only all the follies and infirmities of other older men, but many more which arose from the dreadful prospect of never dying. They were not only opinionative, peevish, covetous, morose, vain, talkative, but incapable of friendship and dead to all natural affection, which never descended below their grandchildren. Envy and impotent desires are their prevailing passions, but those objects against which their envy seems principally directed are the vices of the younger sort and the deaths of the old. By reflecting on the former, they find themselves cut off from all possibility of pleasure, and whenever they see a funeral, they lament and repine that others have gone to an harbor of rest to which they themselves can never hope to arrive. They have no remembrance of anything but what they learned and observed in their youth and middle age, and even that is very imperfect. And for the truth of particulars of any fact, it is safer to depend on common traditions than upon their best recollections. The least miserable among them appear to be those who turn to dotage and entirely lose their memories. These meet with more pity and assistance because they want many bad qualities which abound in others. If Struldbrugg happened to marry one of his own kind, the marriage is dissolved, of course, by the courtesy of the kingdom, as soon as the younger of the two comes to the fourscore. For the law thinks it reasonable indulgence that those who are condemned without any fault of their own to a perpetual continuance in this world should not have their misery doubled by the load of a wife. As soon as they have completed the term of 80 years, they are looked on as dead in the law. Their heirs immediately succeed to their estates, only a small pittance is reserved for their support, and the poorer ones are maintained at the public charge. After that period, they are held incapable of any employment of trust or profit. They cannot purchase lands or take leases, neither are they allowed to be witnesses in any cause, either civil or criminal, not even for the decision of meres and bounds. At 90, they lose their teeth and hair. They have at that age no distinction of taste, but eat and drink whatever they can get, without relish or appetite. The diseases they are subject to still continue without increasing or diminishing. In talking, they forget the common appellation of things and the names of persons, even of those who are the nearest friends and relations. For the same reason, they never can amuse themselves with reading, because their memory will not serve them to carry them from the beginning of a sentence to the end, and by this defect they are deprived of the only entertainment whereof they might otherwise be capable. The language of this country being always upon the flux, the Struldbruggs of one age do not understand those of another, neither are they able after 200 years to hold any conversation, farther than by a few general words, and their neighbors, the mortals, and must lie under the disadvantage of living like foreigners in their own country. This was the account given me of the Struldbruggs as near as I can remember. I afterwards saw 5 or 6 different ages, the youngest not above 200 years old, who were brought to me at several times by some of my friends. But although they were told that I was a great traveler and had seen all the world, they had not the least curiosity to ask me a question, only desired I would give them Schlumdask, or a token of remembrance, which is a modest way of begging, to avoid the law that strictly forbids it, because they are provided for by the public, although indeed with a very scanty allowance. They are despised and hated by all sorts of people. When one of them is born, it is reckoned ominous, and their birth is recorded very particularly, so that you may know their age by consulting the registry, which, however, hath not been kept above 1,000 years past, or at least hath been destroyed by time or public disturbances. But the usual way of computing how old they are is by asking them what kings or great persons they can remember, and then consulting history, for infallibly the last prince in their mind did not begin his reign after they were fourscore years old. They were the most mortifying sight ever I beheld, and the women more horrible than the men. Besides the usual deformities in extreme old age, they acquired an additional ghastliness in proportion to their number of years, which is not to be described, and among half a dozen I soon distinguished which was the oldest, although there were not above a century or two between them. The reader will easily believe that from what I have heard and seen, my keen appetite for perpetuity of life was much abated. I grew heartily ashamed of the pleasing visions I had formed, and thought no tyrant could invent a death into which I would not run with pleasure from such a life. The king heard of all that had passed between me and my friends upon this occasion, and rallied me very pleasantly, wishing I would send a couple of Struldbruggs to my own country to arm our people against the fear of death. But this, it seems, is forbidden by the fundamental laws of the kingdom, or else I should have been well content with the trouble and expense of transporting them. Fascinating look at why we don't want to be immortal.